Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Gracie's Surrender by Blossom Turner, narrated by Connie Shabshab. But Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me, and do not forbid them, for of such is the kingdom of heaven." Matthew chapter 19, verse 14, New King James Version. Chapter 1. March 1879, Shenandoah Valley. "You're turning down another marriage proposal?" Ma put her hands to her temples and rubbed. "But Gracie, he's such a fine young man." The walls of the parlor room closed in on Gracie. Why did men continually misread the situation when she gave them no encouragement at all? It was so frustrating. "You're 18 now and quite old enough to become a wife. And George is an upstanding—" "I never meant to encourage George, and I certainly didn't think he was about to propose. We barely know each other." "What do you mean?" Pa said. "Our families go way back." "But I've never looked at George that way." It was time to tell them a truth they may never understand, especially Ma. Gracie lifted her head high, knotting her trembling hands together. "I have no intention of marrying, ever." She added a firmness to her voice she did not feel. "Why not?" Pa's bushy brows knit together. "Thought most every girl looked forward to that day." That familiar memory came flooding in. Would Rosina's outstretched, bony fingers forever haunt her? "Not this one. I like George, but I don't love him. I want to devote my life to Jesus and—" "For heaven's sakes!" Ma's hands flew into the air. "There's that Jesus talk again." She turned to Pa and wagged her finger in his face. "This is your fault. One by one, every one of our daughters have followed in your footsteps, but this has taken it too far. Set her right." She pointed at Gracie. Rather than prolong the agony, Gracie took a deep breath. She might as well get it all out. If they weren't happy with her now, they sure wouldn't be after she told them the rest of her plans. Pa moved across the room to stand in front of her and gently placed his hands on her upper arms. "Tell us what you're thinking, girl. Neither Ma nor I understand. A woman can love Jesus and be married, too." "I feel God is calling me to move to Richmond and work in the orphanage." "Richmond?" Ma's voice rose a few octaves. "It's not bad enough you don't want to marry George, but you want to move to Richmond as well?" "Please, give me a moment to explain." Gracie pointed to the parlor chairs. "Dear God, please help Ma understand. I don't want to hurt her. Can we sit?" Pa put his arm around Ma and guided her to a chair. "She is an adult, Doris. We should at least bend an ear." Ma slumped into the chair and turned her head to look out the window. Pa chose the chair beside her and gave Gracie his full attention. "Ma, remember when we visited Grandmother and Grandfather when I was 12, and I met that street urchin named Rosina?" Ma nodded. "I'll forever regret letting you and Brian go back and try to find that child the next day. You've never been the same." "You're right. That experience, and then revisiting the orphanage with Amelia and Brian again last year, has deeply impacted my life. The need is so great, with not enough hands to—" "See?" Ma's head snapped toward Pa. "Every time I let one of my children go to Richmond for a visit, they come back with the fadangled idea of moving there." Her eyes blazed as she returned her gaze to Gracie. "And what about a family of your own? How are you going to do that without a husband?" Pa took Ma's hand, but she pulled it free and turned her head back toward the window. He nodded at Gracie to continue. "I don't want to be distracted by men when there are so many children in need." Ma let out a loud harumph. "Besides," Gracie continued, "weren't you just talking about how Grandmother is grieving Grandfather so terribly? I could cheer up her lonely days." Pa glanced at Ma. "Doris, you did say you were worried about your mother. Amelia confirmed she hasn't been doing very well since your father passed. We could let Gracie give the orphanage a trial run and give your mother some much-needed company at the same time." "Well, I never—" Ma shot up from her chair and pointed at Pa. "You're siding with her. Was all this cooked up ahead of time? You two and that god of yours?" "No," they answered in unison as she marched from the room. The stomp of her feet could be heard on every step up to her bedroom before her door slammed shut. Gracie's hands scrunched her dress tightly. She relaxed and smoothed out the wrinkles. "Pa, you understand, don't you?" She stared at the floor planks. Would he be disappointed in her as well? "I'm not sure I do." Gracie looked over into his kind brown eyes. "But far be it from me to get in the way of what God is telling you to do. Your ma, on the other hand—" He rubbed his work-worn hands back and forth on his brow. "She's going to need some time. When were you hoping to go?" "As soon as possible. Thought it would be easier for George if I'm not around, and have already secured an invitation from Grandmother to stay as long as I like." "Must you cut the tie so abruptly? Your ma's heart is going to take a beating to let her baby girl go." "She still has Jeanette, and weren't you both just willing to marry me off to George?" "George is a 10-minute buggy ride away. Richmond is another story." "I'll promise to come home for visits." "Well, I'll be holding you to that, girlie. And don't worry about your ma. I'll talk to her." He stood. "She may not be tickled pink, but she'll come around. Just be sure this is something you really feel you need to do." "Thanks, Pa." Gracie flew across the room into his arms and planted a big kiss on the top of his brow. She was finally going to fulfill the calling God had whispered into her heart all those years ago. The sky was as blue as forget-me-nots, the morning sunshine teasing the buds on the trees to respond to its glory. A beautiful spring day to travel. Gracie settled in her seat, eager for the train to leave. A thrill pulsed through. A lurch and a chug, and they were off, her new adventure unfolding. Each mile the train rumbled down the track away from the Shenandoah Valley. Gracie's excitement grew. Why did she feel as if her life was finally about to begin? "May I sit here?" Gracie turned from the window to see a strapping young man with a wheedling smile. Instinct told her to keep her distance, but politeness forced a response. "I haven't paid for 2 seats." She laughed to hide her nervousness. The last thing she needed was attention from any man. A distinguished gentleman from across the aisle looked their way and raised his eyebrows. What had she done that was inappropriate? Should she have told the stranger to sit elsewhere? Having been raised on the farm, she had little knowledge of worldly etiquette. "John Delaware." The stranger tipped his cowboy hat in her direction and slid into the seat. His smile widened and he moved a tad too close. Gracie turned toward the window and gazed out. She didn't want to be rude, but neither did she want to encourage him. "May I have the pleasure of your name?" Gracie sighed heavily. She hated to be discourteous. Grace Williams." "I like Gracie a far cry better than the formal Grace. I would wager a bet that your personality most likely suits Gracie." He pulled out a small can of chewing tobacco and popped some in his mouth. "I suppose it does," she answered, not comfortable with the stranger's overt interest. Why did her looks always have to be a magnet? She had prayed she would make it to Richmond without undue attention. "Where are you coming from and where are you headed?" he asked between chews. He turned toward the aisle and spat. A rivulet of spittle hit the back of the seat in front of him. He did nothing to remove it. Gracie took the opportunity to look back out the window, hoping to ignore him. "Well," he said, not taking the hint. She turned his way. "Mr. Delaware, please don't take this personally, but I have a lot on my mind, and I would prefer to be left alone." "Oh, too hoity-toity for the likes of the working cowboy, eh? I know a brush-off when I hear one." "It's not that. I've chosen to give my life in service to God and—" "To God?" A loud, mocking laugh filled the air. His voice doubled in volume. "What? A nun?" Gracie's cheeks bloomed hot. "No, not a nun." "What a waste of God-given beauty. You're meant to make some man very happy, not be closeted away in some monastery somewhere." "I do believe the lady was politely asking you to leave her alone." The man from across the aisle was glaring at Mr. Delaware. Gracie glanced his direction, trying to communicate gratitude in the look. Mr. Delaware swiveled in his seat. "What's it to you?" The man slid across the 2 seats to the aisle and stood. He removed his top hat and still stood a head above Mr. Delaware, who had also popped up. "What? Are you her guardian?" "As a matter of fact, I'm her brother. Now move along, cowboy." His deep voice resonated authority. Mr. Delaware looked back and forth between the two. "A nun is not worth my time anyway." He spat out a large gob of chewing tobacco and sauntered away. "Thank you, brother." Gracie smiled up at him. He leaned close, his sweet breath fanning her face. "I overheard you saying you were giving your life in service to God. I'm a Christian too, so that makes you my sister in Christ." He straightened and looked down at her. "Best not to give that smile so freely to strangers. Offers the wrong impression." Gracie could feel the happiness melt from her face, and her ire rose like steam from the train engine. A girl couldn't even be friendly in this world without men taking it the wrong way. The man slid back into his seat without a sideways glance in her direction. Much to her vexation, his strong jawline and formidable countenance drew Gracie's interest the rest of the way to Richmond. She found herself piquing his way one too many times. A man without a wedding ring who was not bent on making her acquaintance was a rare find indeed. They could be friends. Too bad their paths would never cross again. Matthew kept his eyes riveted to the landscape out the train window. He could see nothing but a blur. Who would let their young and beautiful daughter travel unchaperoned? Was she really so naive that she thought she could smile that alluring smile and not draw the men in like the bell chime of a Sunday morning steeple? Women who looked like her were not the kind who gave their lives in service to God. They were the kind who got snatched up and married off in record time. If she wasn't going to be a nun, who was she, and what was her plan, and why didn't she have a guardian with her? It bothered him that he wanted to turn and stare at her like most of the men had done when she entered the train, married and unmarried alike. She had smiled at everyone and stopped long enough to chat with a little girl sitting beside her mama. That was when her big doe-like eyes came alive and sparkled with joy. Though he had wanted to be immune to the attraction he felt, he was not. Her dark, wavy hair was plaited in a braid that swung around to the front and hung long down her torso. Her hairstyle and clothing were not the latest fashion, but all was eclipsed by the petite vision of loveliness she made. Slim, delicate bones with curves in all the right places. He shook his head against the pull and closed his eyes. When was the last time a woman had consumed his thoughts? He was prepared to wait for the one God had for him, not get sidetracked by mere physical attraction. He knew better than that. He usually wasn't so shallow. He ventured a sideways glance, hoping to dispel the odd sensation causing the erratic beat of his heart. Her profile was turned toward the window, so he took a moment to do what almost every man on the train had already done, enjoy God's creation of perfection. Round, bright cheeks that looked petal-soft, delicate earlobes, and a buttoned mouth that was curved upward at something outside. Did she smile all the time? Before he could avert his eyes, she glanced his direction. He quickly turned away. Richmond could not come fast enough. He did not look again. When the train jostled and screeched to a stop, he wasted no time in gathering his few belongings and standing to leave. She did the same. The gentleman in him bid he allow her to go first. "After you." "Thank you, brother," she said, with definite sass on her lips. He felt an uncontrollable urge to kiss that smile right off her generous mouth. Instead, he followed her off the train and watched a coachman hail her. The two of them disappeared into the crowd. Good thing. What was happening to him? This sudden attraction to a perfect stranger? She was perfect, and it irritated him to the core. Any longer in her presence, and he would have done something completely out of character, like ask her to dinner. Chapter 2. These past 2 weeks have so lifted my drowning spirits. Gracie set her tea on the table at Grandmother's words. Having you here, well, it's pulled me out of the sadness and given me a reason to get up in the morning. Gracie offered a slow smile of agreement. For me too, Grandmother. You've been so kind and generous, and your home is so welcoming. She looked beyond the veranda into the perfectly manicured garden, where spring tulips, daffodils, and violets provided a riotous show of color. Pshaw! Grandmother's hand batted the air. Having you here is much more to my advantage than yours. I love it here. Everything about Richmond felt right. Her promise to God to return to this very city and that orphanage was of utmost importance to her. She was eager to get started. Surely her services would be needed somewhere. It would have been wise to have written in advance and worked out the details herself instead of relying on Amelia. Why hadn't she done that? She lifted her baby finger to her mouth and nibbled at a hangnail. Amelia's family will arrive soon for the midday meal. After that, Brian will take you to the orphanage and introduce you to the superintendent. She and Grandmother had discussed this already. I'm so looking forward to it. Gracie lifted the pendant from around her neck and looked at the time. Like, right now. Heavens, is it noon already? Time spent with you just flies on by. We best head into the dining room. Grandmother tried to pull herself up from the veranda chair and failed. Give an old lady a hand. She waved Gracie over. Goodness, there is no preparing one for how difficult aging is. Gracie placed her hand under her grandmother's elbow to help lift, and then held her arm into the dining room. She didn't let go until Grandmother was safely in her place at the head of the table. Gracie took a seat next to her, and Grandmother patted her hand. And if you find meaningful employment at the orphanage, you'll be here to stay. That will make this old woman very happy indeed. Oh, no, I'm not looking for employment, Grandmother. I'm quite prepared to volunteer my time. Both Amelia and Catherine have offered to help pay my expenses. They want to support my life of ministry. Grandmother's eyebrows arched. A life can be a very long time. Her eyes clouded and she looked heavenward. I should be thankful I had your grandfather for as long as I did. But honestly, I feel so lost without him. She dabbed at the corner of one eye. Gracie folded her fingers over the wrinkled, translucent skin of her grandmother's hand and gave a slight squeeze. That's another reason I feel God brought me here. For you. Grandmother turned in Gracie's direction. Her full head of white hair pulled up in a chignon gave her a regal look, but her eyes spoke of the pain in her heart. Do you really think God cares about individual lives? And mine in particular? I haven't given him much mind over the years. I believe with all of my heart that he cares about you. Well then, girl, you'll have to rub some of that faith off on me, and I shall be delighted to be counted in that number of those who want to support you in your good cause. Voices and laughter echoed down the hall. Amelia, Brian, 6-year-old Jenny, and 4-year-old Pearl spilled into the room. Just in time, Grandmother waved them in. The meal is hot and ready. I still can't believe I have a sister living so close. Amelia hugged Gracie and slid into the chair beside her. I sure hope you love Richmond and your work at the orphanage, because I want you to stay. I just said the same, Grandmother admitted. The smell of fried chicken, vegetables, and mashed potatoes and gravy wafted up from the table, but Gracie was too excited to eat. About the orphanage, what's the superintendent's name, and what is he like? Do you think he'll allow me to work with the girls if I have a reference from you? Whoa, so many questions, Amelia laughed. How about we say grace, and then Brian and I will fill you in. Girls, come get seated. I want to sit beside Aunt Gracie. Jenny slipped onto the chair next to her. No, I want to sit beside her. Pearl pulled at her sister's clothing. Stop, girls, Amelia said. You can both sit beside her. Pearl, come over here. Amelia rounded the table to sit beside Brian, and Pearl climbed up beside Gracie, swallowed by a chair far too big for her frame, but her eyes shone with happiness. They shouldn't get their own way when they're misbehaving like that. Brian raised his eyebrows at the girls, his tone firm. We'll excuse the excitement this time, Grandmother said. Gracie is a bit of a novelty right now. Brian, why don't you say the blessing? Gracie did not hear the prayer. Her head was swimming with 100 questions as Brian offered a quick thanks for the meal. The prayer was barely finished when Gracie blurted out, Tell me everything you know about the orphanage. Where to begin? Brian plopped a large spoonful of mashed potatoes on his plate. I better start from the ground up. I'm part of the board that oversees the 3 most important things about keeping the orphanage doors open, running it like a business, keeping it like a house, and involving the community like neighbors. Sounds like there's a lot more than looking after the children, Gracie said. Absolutely. If you can't keep the money flowing in, the children will have no home, hence the board. What do? There are 12 volunteers who take on this task, both men and women. You'll get to know all of us as we all have different roles, so the sooner you learn the names, the better. Mr. Lewis is the board president. He is a financial whiz. I work closely with him and Edwin Fuller regarding the finances. We invest in real estate, stocks and bonds, particularly the railroad at the moment. It's booming. Goodness, don't bore her with too many details about the finances. Amelia patted his arm. She looked across at Gracie. He does tend to rattle on about what he loves. They all laughed. Are you finished mocking me, my dear? But the look he gave his wife was filled with affection. Remember, short and sweet so poor Gracie has a hope of remembering the pertinent information. All right, I'll get to the point. He smiled across at Gracie. My mother, Melinda Preston, has been a long-time member and sits as first vice president. She works with Dorothy Greenbrier and Eliza Whittle on community involvement and fundraising. Whatever you do, stay on the right side of Eliza. She is one problem you do not need. Amelia nodded. 'Tis true. Reverend Paterkin is secretary and collaborates with local churches drumming up volunteers who help with the donation of their time and money. Then the 3 sisters. Grandmother tittered. Oh, do let me tell. Her eyebrows danced with delight. I've had the pleasure of having Myrtle, Matilda, and Margot Hampshire as friends for many years. They are a delightful trio indeed. Brian smirked. Amelia grinned, and Grandmother looked like she had just swallowed the truth. What are you not telling me? Gracie asked. Grandmother leaned nearer as if sharing a secret. Let's just say these 3 spinsters have a lot of time on their hands. They are as helpful as it comes, but goodness, can they talk? Unless you have an hour to waste, run in the opposite direction. Grandmother shook her head. I think they are spinsters because any man who came near that household could not take the 3 of them on. They stick together like peas in a pod, always have, even as children. Brian chuckled. They do the monthly inspections at the orphanage, so you'll get to know them well, very well. Though overwhelming at times, they're the epitome of kindness and helpfulness, Amelia added. You name it, housekeeping, staff issues, shopping for goods, even helping out with the children, they'll pitch in. Brian nodded. And then there's Dr. Parker, who aids Amelia with all things medical, and that's the board. Who runs the orphanage on a daily basis? Gracie took a bite, trying to stuff the food past her nervousness. That's Matthew. He's the superintendent entrusted with the management of the home. Well, 2 homes, to be accurate. We're doing an experiment never done before to see if we can cut costs. We purchased a new property with 2 separate homes, a house for the girls and another for the boys. With the homes on the same property, we save on staff. 1 common kitchen and eating area, 1 menu for all, 1 gardener, 1 superintendent's salary, and so on. How ingenious. Gracie was getting more excited by the moment. To be part of something so well-run and progressive would be amazing. Her dream to make a difference in the lives of orphan children in Richmond was about to unfold. Wish I'd thought of that myself, but it was Matthew's idea, Brian admitted. He's quite brilliant and presented the idea as a way of saving money, but also with the children in mind. Never seen anyone so insistent that, for normal social development, a mixture of males and females, just like one would find in a family, was needed. Having 2 homes on the same property allows for some interaction between the boys and girls. When we crunched the numbers, it made good sense on many levels. What is Matthew like? Gracie's stomach rolled, and she pushed at the food on her plate. What if he didn't like her? Matthew is a no-nonsense fellow, but fair. He's young to be in such a place of authority, but he's very intelligent and a gifted leader. My mother insisted upon him, and since he took over a year ago, that orphanage has improved 100-fold. I look after their bank account, and somehow Matthew miraculously does more with less. You can sing his praise all you want, my dear, Amelia said. But does he have to be so, I don't know, what's a kind way of saying he acts far too old and strict for his age? Brian faced his wife. One has to have those qualities to handle all those ruffians, and he's had a tough life. That makes anyone grow up fast. Tough life? Grandmother asked. I can say no more on the matter. It's his story to tell. He popped a bite of bread in his mouth as if to accentuate the point. Fair enough. Amelia patted her husband's arm and looked across the table at Gracie. You may find Matthew a tad brittle, but now Mariana, the dear old soul who oversees the girls, is an absolute sweetheart. And the children, oh my, the children will break your heart, but bring so much joy. Gracie's insides twisted and knotted at the thought of this Matthew man. What if he thought she was too young and didn't want her at the orphanage? Or, like Ma and Pa, thought a woman's destiny was no more than marriage and children of her own. He had the power to squelch her dream right then and there. She had no backup plan, and she certainly didn't want to go home and face Ma with the possibility that she had not heard from God. That would damage the name of Christ, and reinforce Ma's belief that God didn't speak nor answer prayers. She stuffed her worries and tried to concentrate on the chatter of the children. Annie Gracie, do you think I can come play with the orphan kids when you're there? Jenny asked. Let's just allow your Aunt Gracie to get settled in before we pile on visitors. But I'm not a visitor. I'm her special girl. She already told me that. Me too, yelled Pearl in a shrill squeal. Me too. They all laughed. Now look what you started, Amelia said. 2 weeks in and my girls are already spoiled by their Auntie Gracie. Oh, and about that. I'd prefer to be called Grace. Gracie sounds so immature, and if this Matthew guy is a little starchy, I think Grace will sound more professional. Don't want to give him the wrong impression right from the get-go. Or have you already told him my name? I haven't spoken to Matthew about you coming, but Brian... Amelia turned toward him. No, Brian shook his head. I haven't said a word to him. Amelia's eyes widened. But I told you she was coming to help at the orphanage. Brian's eyes narrowed. You didn't clear it with Matthew? Gracie's eyes flickered from one to the other. Was she hearing right? Her body broke out into a cold sweat. Neither of you talked to him? Gracie's voice wavered. Grandmother lifted her dinner napkin and waved it in the air. Surely there's nothing to fret about. Who would turn down free help, especially from a woman?
Sample complete. Ready to continue?